Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the David Icke Connector Videocast. As we do every week, we're going to cover a range of subjects, things that have gone on this week during lockdown. But you might see from the title, we're focusing mainly on what's going on in care homes in Britain and across the world. So we'll focus on that mainly for the beginning, and then obviously we'll work through some other subjects. But first of all, Dad, how are you on the Isle of Wight, mate?
I'm good, mate. I've been going out 4 days a week, as I always have done, to walk in the countryside. And since the lockdown started, it's been like the Mary Celeste. I mean, the only thing missing has been an half-eaten meal. Nobody. But on Monday, when I went to walk in the same place every time, it was like a normal day before in terms of number of people walking, number of people and families riding their bikes down the old railway tracks, which are now walkways. And there's more cars on the road here than there has been since the lockdown started. Certainly my last experience of going out anyway. So I do think there is something going on. And you'll always have the software program people. They'll always be the vast majority, at least in the times we live in, who the government presses enter and they react as the government tells them. But I think this lockdown has given a lot of people who do have a mind they're prepared to use of their own, who've had time to consider a lot of things. What this is all about, because to anyone with any modicum of intelligence, it makes no sense whatsoever what's going on in relation to why it's supposed to be going on. And a lot of people are now beginning to reevaluate the world they live in and the forces that control it and to what end, more than ever before. And I'm sure that will continue. And it should, because how long are people just going to sit here and be told what to do and watch their lives and their livelihoods disappearing, being deleted now by the hour by people who you wouldn't trust to run a fish and chip shop? I mean, Matt Hancock, the health secretary, is telling 66 million people what they should do. They should stay here and not do this and not do that. Have you seen him? And of course, he's just a gopher. What's happened is that there has been a takeover, both sides of the Atlantic and across Europe and the rest of the world, by unelected dark suit technocrats. Because politicians aren't making decisions anymore. They're announcing decisions, but they're not making them. Oh, we are listening to the scientists. Okay. So what's their agenda and who are they connected to? Brackets, Bill bloody Gates every time virtually. Both sides of the Atlantic again. And so we are being told what to do and we are being dictated to, not even by elected officials anymore, which would be bad enough, but by dark suit technocrats who've never seen a ballot box in their life. And this has just happened in weeks. And so many people still sit there. And at the same time, oh yeah, but it's dangerous. The hospitals are near empty. The confirmation of this coming from around the world, including down the road from me here, and I'm going to get into that in a minute because it's a microcosm of the macrocosm, St. Mary's Hospital on the Isle of Wight. They're all saying, those that have the guts to speak out or speak privately, hospital's never been so quiet. And why wouldn't that be? Because A, there's not a pandemic, and B, because they claim there is, they've stopped all other operations and treatments and diagnosis consultations, and thus vastly more people, vastly more, are going to die from the lockdowns than are alleged to have died. I say it's a re-diagnosis from this so-called COVID-19, which kind of brings us to the care homes. You know, when you follow the propaganda, and that's what you're doing when you're following government pronouncements, you see when another stage has been brought in, because suddenly everyone starts to talk about it at the same time. It's like in America, you know, you get a political talking point, as they call them, and suddenly everyone on all the news shows is talking about the same thing, and you see it's propaganda. And you can see this with this so-called pandemic propaganda. So the new buzz term in the last week has been care homes and nursing homes, because now they're saying that, I mean, the World Health Organization, which of course is owned by Gates, second biggest funder only to the United States, they're saying that perhaps half the people said to have died in Europe from, quote, COVID-19, which they're not even testing for, it's never been isolated, will come from long-term care homes. And this has been, of course, the theme in Britain, the care homes. How many are going to die in care homes? Well, here's a clue. Lots of people are going to die and are dying in care homes, but not from COVID-19, but from the effects of the lockdown. And what you bloody liars are going to do and are doing is, when they die of these causes from lockdown and lack of treatment, you are going to say they died from COVID-19, and your figures are going to go up to frighten the shit even more out of the population. Now, as you know, Gaz, we were contacted by a nursing home nurse, and I know you're aware of who it is, but I'm just going to quote what was said in the communication to us, because this encapsulates what's happening in the care homes and why eventually it's going to come to light that lots and lots of old people have died in these care and nursing homes. And my books for decades have highlighted this agenda, not only for killing vast numbers of old people, eventually, the eventually has arrived, but even more forward projected, to have what the insiders of this cult behind all this stuff call the demise pill, where people get to a certain age and then they take a demise pill and go. Because they are what Kissinger, psychopath Kissinger, called useless eaters. These are people who've given their entire lives and lived their entire lives. They've paid tax their entire lives, and they get to the end of their lives and they are given a pathetic pension that makes them choose between often eating or being warm. And then we're told we have to have the lockdown to protect old people because we care so much. Well, they don't give a damn. And what they've done is taken the opportunity, not just in Britain either, to get rid of loads of old people. One, by not giving them treatment, and two, by getting them to sign do not resuscitate agreements, which means they can be allowed to die and not revived. So this is what this nurse said, and it captures what's going on. I'm seeing firsthand now what's going on at the nursing homes, including mine. It's murder, mate. I'm not saying it lightly. I'm willing, once this is done, to go on record with the bastards. If there is any information I can give you, I will help. Well, I've seen firsthand now the community matrons and doctors following orders, basically just denying treatments to residents on the account they have COVID. No test, no nothing. Not the test would matter because they're not testing for COVID-19, but for genetic material that vast numbers of people have in their body. But they're not even going through the motions of testing, Gaz. They're just saying, well, they've got COVID-19. And once that happens, they have to be isolated and all that follows from that. And then when they die of other things, like lack of bloody treatment, oh, another COVID-19 death. So he says, doctors are now not coming into my home to examine anyone. I've had absolute murder with people begging to be placed on antibiotics. In a few weeks, you're going to see dead old people all over the place. I'm done, mate, to be honest, once this is over. This is not why I became a nurse. That's what's going on in the care homes. And that's why large numbers of old people there are going to die and are dying.
So I imagine the mainstream media, have they ignored this or are they spinning it?
Well, I don't think they're going to ignore it, Gaz, because they're going to want to push this whole death toll in care homes to further fuel the hysteria of how dangerous this alleged virus is. But spinning it, certainly, because they don't want to highlight the fact that old people in larger numbers are dying in care homes and nursing homes because of the lockdown. And here's an example, right? This is a guy called Alex Thompson, who, from my point of view, shockingly, is chief correspondent of Britain's Channel 4 News. And he posted an article headed "Coronavirus Causing Devastation in Care Homes as Pressure Grows to Release Full Death Numbers." And of course, when that pressure grows and they release the numbers, it'll all be screaming out how dangerous this virus is and how it's killing all these old people. And he said that 1 in 5 of all deaths in England and Wales in the week ending April the 3rd are linked to coronavirus, with the overall death rate pushed to a record high. Well, Mr. Thompson, have you ever considered why that might be? Or do you only just repeat government handouts and government statements? It doesn't take a great deal of research for a proper journalist to find out what is happening in these care homes, as opposed to what the spin story is telling us.
Exactly. I got a message last night, actually, from a friend. I'll just get it now. And he was saying, I've just been sent this by my friend who's an ambulance worker. It says, mate, the coroners just said they've had 7 bodies they were meant to collect from care homes, but they cancelled and just took them straight to the undertakers. No post-mortem, but they're putting COVID on the death certificate. Quelle surprise. In terms of the lockdown, though, we spoke about this right at the very beginning. We said that the lockdown would kill more people than the supposed virus. That was obvious to anyone with a brain. And it's not just going to kill old people, is it, either?
No, it's not. And that message is classic. I mean, you know, sometimes I could scream at the fact that all this is going on. People are beginning to speak out about it. And there are all these people just sitting there, never looking at anything other than a government statement. That includes the media, but it includes vast numbers of the general public. And when you give your mind away, someone else takes it over, and they have. And you're absolutely right. I've got a story here. This encapsulates the vast number of people, vastly more, way more than is even claimed to have been caused by COVID-19, are going to die because of the lockdown and because of the cancelled operations and cancelled diagnosis consultations, etc. And this one story kind of just gives you a feeling. It's from Britain, but this will be going on everywhere around the world. Thousands missing out on cancer diagnosis. Delays in diagnosing and treating people with cancer could lead to more years of lost life than with COVID-19, according to a leading cancer expert. A drop-off in screening and referrals means roughly 2,700 fewer people are being diagnosed every week, Cancer Research UK says. Cancer screening has paused in Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, with few invitations sent out in England. Richard Sullivan, a professor of cancer and global health at King's College London, said there was more fear. I mean, wait for this. This is the scale of the psychological warfare that's gone on the human psyche all over the world. Richard Sullivan, professor of cancer and global health at King's College London, said there was more fear of COVID-19 than having cancer at the moment. With general practitioner doctors more difficult to contact than normal, try impossible for most people, this was resulting in a dramatic drop-off in referrals to specialists, he said. UK estimates reckon that excess deaths are going to be way greater than we are going to see with COVID-19, even if you believe the official story. With cancer patients generally much younger, Professor Sullivan predicted years of lost life will be quite dramatic on top of a huge amount of avoidable mortality. The article quotes an example of a lady who's been diagnosed before the lockdown with skin cancer, and then all future consultations on it have been cancelled, have been stopped. Sarah Woolner, Executive Director for Policy at Cancer Research UK, said it was of huge concern that there had been a 75% drop in urgent referrals by GPs of people with suspected cancer. How many of those people, 75% less than normal, who are not getting diagnosis, are going to die who would not necessarily have done without the lockdown?
Exactly. And that's just cancer as well. That's not anything else.
And here's, according to this cancer charity, Cancer Research UK, 2,300 people a week are not being diagnosed through urgent referrals. 400 people a week are not being diagnosed through screening. And she said, our plea is that we get back to some kind of normality as soon as possible. Most screening hubs are not sending out invitations, even though we have not had official word. Screening is effectively paused in England. Patients are not seeking help. And then if they are referred on, much of the diagnostic activity is on hold. And the story goes on. With a large number of staff self-isolating at home, many cancer treatments have been delayed. A lot of services have had to be scaled back. We've seen a dramatic decrease in the amount of elective cancer surgery, this Professor Sullivan said, and that huge numbers of patients would be stuck. And this is a big area. You know, they talk, Gaz, about that the health services must be protected from being overrun because of this fake pandemic. And therefore, all these operations and consultations have been cancelled. That's why the hospitals are half empty, or less than half empty, a lot of them. But what the heck overwhelming pressure is there going to be on the health services when the full scale of the consequences in destroyed health in the population from these lockdowns unfolds? And then where's the funding going to come from when the country's basically bankrupt? You know, wherever you look, you're looking at insanity. And my experience of tracking these people of 30 years, whenever you're looking at madness, complete and utter madness, yes, there are people who are, you know, unbelievably inept, stupid, and ridiculous, who are the gophers of the system, who just do what they're told. But in the shadows where this is coming from, it appears to be madness from the point of view that they're trying to do what's best for humanity. When you realize they're trying to destroy and control and enslave humanity, suddenly their madness becomes genius. And that's what we're looking at. Anyway, this is what he said. Huge numbers of patients would be stuck in a backlog when cancer services were opened up again, creating an enormous challenge for hospitals. Everything they say they're protecting hospitals from by destroying the world economy, they're actually creating in the future exactly that and worse. It could take 6 to 12 months for cancer services to return to normal, but only if the lockdown measures were unlocked very quickly. Don't hold your breath. And you're right, say, Gaz, that is just cancer. What about everything else?
That's the thing, and like you say, they're not going to be lifting anything anytime soon. I think most people have just got to kind of understand that. And to go back to your original point, when we first started chatting about the fact that you've gone out for a walk and you've seen more people, it's the same here. It's the same here. Everyone for the first few weeks was basically just locked down. No one, like I would go out to the shops, or I would, take a Laura out for a walk, and you wouldn't see people. It's really different now. Really different now. You're seeing a lot more people out and about, which is great, because because kids should be outdoors, and you should be getting vitamin D to build your immune system, even if you believe this is real.
Well, I'll tell you how ludicrous it is, because like I say, I go back to what I've just said. It seems to be madness, and with the gophers to play it out, it is madness. But in the shadows, there's method in the madness. And so you have another apparent madness, but there's method in it. And that is that medical practitioners, people around the world, are saying, even if you believe in this virus, that the best way to kill it is going out in the sunshine. Because it can't survive. It can't survive outside the body for a start. And yet, what are they doing? Telling people to sit away and outside the sunshine. I mean, everything's inverted. Everything's inverted because it's a scam. And what people are starting to get, more and more people are starting to get, is the numbers just don't add up. And we've had a brilliant video on davidicke.com this week, which was made by a 21-year experience respiratory doctor in the United States, who was confirming virtually everything I've been saying for weeks. And he was standing in a storeroom in his hospital, and behind him were all these machines. And they had covers on, they weren't being used. And he explained, as I've been going on about for a long time now, that there is this death certificate scam where no matter what people die of, they're COVID-19. This is where the figures are coming from. It's re-diagnosis. And then you've got the test that doesn't test for COVID-19. So you test positive for it. You're not tested positive for COVID-19, but it goes down as if you do it. And this combination is where the figures of cases and deaths are actually coming from. And he was saying many things that show it's a scam. And one of them, he said, was these machines behind me. They're machines that when people are short of breath, that's the first thing you put them on. And it's a simple machine. You put a mask on and it gives you oxygen. He said, since this COVID-19 hysteria started, we've been ordered by the authorities that we can't use these machines. In his words, we have to let people crash and put them straight on a full-blown ventilator. And not only are health authorities, and it takes very few people at the top of these pyramids in each country, health authorities in all the different countries, United States and Britain, etc., not only are they telling doctors and medical staff that if someone tests positive for COVID-19, they die, they must have that on the death certificate. There's financial incentives. There's a Minnesota state senator in America called Scott Jensen, doctor himself. And he did an interview in which he pointed out that the Medicare health operation in America has a series of payments that it gives to hospitals in different situations. Wait for this if you haven't come across it. If a hospital now diagnoses someone with regular pneumonia, nothing to do with COVID-19, regular pneumonia, they get paid through the Medicare system $4,600. If they diagnose a COVID-19 caused pneumonia, the hospitals get $13,000. And if they put a COVID-19 diagnosed patient on a ventilator, they get $39,000. So you're looking at a payout of tens and tens of thousands of dollars if you put COVID-19 as a diagnosis and put them on a ventilator, which would make some sense, would it not, of what that doctor said. We're not allowed that interim response machine now. We have to go straight to a ventilator, and we have to let people crash to justify the ventilator. And he was confirming this whole thing. And we have seen more and more doctors come out, but the vast majority have not. The vast majority of medical staff have not. Some of them are too busy making dancing videos in empty hospital wards. But they need to, because if they don't, they're going to regret not doing so for the rest of their life.
It's a really interesting point in terms of that respiratory therapist, because we've got that story on davidicke.com. I've actually had to replace the video 3 times now because it's been deleted by YouTube. And so you look at it and you think, right, okay, so this is a guy in his hospital. He's explaining what's happening. Why is YouTube deleting that? You know, if you don't believe it's a conspiracy, you don't believe something's going on, even then you must have to look and go, well, why would they delete that? Against what terms and conditions is that?
It becomes very simple once you realize what we're dealing with and how the structure works. So you've got this global cult that its central control system is in the shadows, and it controls a global web, which all these different, apparently individual interconnected organizations are connected to. So it owns Bill Gates, for instance, who's fronting this whole pandemic vaccine thing up. But it also owns Zuckerberg of Facebook. It also owns Google, also owns Google-owned YouTube, as fronted up by this woman, Susan Wojcicki. It owns Vimeo, and so on and so forth. And so what happens is the cult created the World Health Organization via the Rockefellers, and it's now run by Bill Gates. So this is how it works. The cult-owned Bill Gates dictates what the cult-owned World Health Organization does and says. The cult-owned YouTube and Facebook and all these others, they say, we're going to censor anyone who challenges what the World Health Organization says, which is Gates and the cult, and whose YouTube and Google and Facebook, they're the cult. So this explains why they're doing it. They have a narrative, a big lie, which they are trying to get the entire world to believe about this so-called pandemic. And if you want to control the world, you have to control perception. It's by controlling perception that you've got billions of people sitting in their homes doing what some bunch of prats are telling them they have to do. So if you're going to control perception, you have to control information, which is where perception comes from. So you say World Health Organization, owned by Gates, owned by the cult, created by the cult, drives the official story, the official narrative, and the cult-owned Silicon Valley giants then defend that narrative from being exposed by members of the public, proper journalists, because the mainstream media, of course, will never do that, because there's hardly a proper journalist among them. So this is how it works. It's ever so simple. And we've now gone as far as Facebook saying that not only are they going to delete posts that challenge the World Health Organization brackets cult version of events, they're going to be warning people who talk about the fact that they've been deleted. I mean, this is straight from 1984. In fact, it's very appropriate that some people call this COVID-19 84.
One thing I've noticed over the last couple of days that's actually started to wake people up, that I've got friends obviously from all different walks of life, and there's certain people that you just don't bother really having a conversation with about certain things because it's just not worth your breath. But they're nice people, and you talk about football or whatever. But even pro-vaxxers have kind of started to question now because they're into vaccines and they think they're fantastic or what have you. They know how long it takes to develop one and test one. And so this thing's come out of China apparently in December time. And here we are in April and we're already doing human trials in the UK, we're doing them yesterday. So even these people are going, well, that doesn't add up because I know how long it takes to develop a vaccine, and that's very quick, isn't it? So even I feel like they're forcing things too quickly, really, and they're almost biting themselves in the arse a little bit.
Well, there's a number of things to say about that. One reason they're forcing it through quickly is they are aware that the longer distance there is between running the scam and getting the vaccine ready, ready in quotes, the more people are going to have the chance to see through the scam, as more and more people are. But I said, the first London Real interview I did on this subject, some many weeks ago now, the first one, I said, they're talking about developing a vaccine. I said, the vaccine already exists. All this stuff, we're fighting about a vaccine and who's funding the vaccines? Bill Gates. Who's saying that people will not be able to go back to a normal life until they have the vaccine? Bill Gates. I mean, hello. And so what you're seeing, and this Matt Hancock bloke getting a few mentions this week, he said this week that these vaccine trials were going on, human vaccine trials, and that it normally takes years to get to this stage. Well, it hasn't. And it hasn't because basically what's in the vaccine, what's planned to be in the vaccine, including nano microchips to connect us to this smart grid AI reality that they're creating. The vaccine's been ready all along. The vaccine was ready before they played the scam to justify the vaccine. This is how the whole thing works. People have no idea, most people have no idea how long this has been planned and how long forward this is projected. You know, Aldous Huxley, when he wrote Brave New World, and it's proved to be so accurate with modern events, George Orwell, who wrote 1984, published in 1948, and people I've quoted in the books decades and decades ago who were saying what was going to happen, and they've been proved to be insiders, I mean, who have proved to be amazingly accurate. Where did their accuracy come from? Because this is projected forward a long time. It's not made up on the hoof. And so they will have had the vaccine ready and what they want to get into people before they played the scam to justify the vaccine. That's why it's happening so quickly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like I say, that's starting to make people question things that wouldn't normally. And then there seems to be a desperation from where I'm looking. So you sent me a couple of stories a couple of days ago to post on davidicke.com where they've lost the narrative in terms of information. People are starting to question things. And of course, you know, all your big Silicon Valley lot are all censoring, but they don't seem to be censoring quickly enough. People are speaking and having conversations about things to the point now where the British Army are getting involved in terms of controlling information on the internet, psychological warfare.
Yeah. There was a bloke this week at one of these British government daily briefings, they call them, about this current situation. And he was called General Nick Carter, Chief of the Defence Staff, must be important. And he wore a camouflage uniform. I had to smile. What was he thinking? He's going to blend into the wooden wall background in a government department. Anyway, he's wearing this camouflage uniform. I could still see it. And he said a number of things. And one of them was that a infamous unit of the British Army, and there's one in Israel, there's one in America, same all over the place, called the 77th Brigade, was countering misinformation on the internet. Now, just ponder that. A British Army unit is setting out to undermine the views of people on the internet that don't match the narrative. And so much is going on in the background militarily that people don't realize. This was just one story covering it. Defense Chief says 77th Brigade is countering COVID misinformation, i.e. anything challenging the official story. The military. The UK's Chief of Defence Staff, General Sir Nick Carter, has revealed the secretive 77th Brigade of the British Army is involved in countering coronavirus misinformation online. Speaking at today's daily briefing, Carter said the unit, which was set up in 2015 to specialise, wait for this, to specialise in non-lethal forms of psychological warfare and the use of the likes of Facebook and Twitter to, quote, fight the information age. And it had been tackling false information about the pandemic on the web. False information meaning at odds with what's being put out by the Gates World Health Organization, and thus through its subsidiaries called governments of countries. So here we have the British Army defending the official narrative and seeking to undermine the freedom of people to have a different view. This is the same army that waffles on and pontificates about itself in terms of standing up for values and freedom. Now, last thing you do, the one thing we've learned, some of us already knew it, one thing we big time learned from this lockdown is that the law enforcement authorities in all their forms, including the bloody military, they're not here to defend human freedom and defend human rights. They're there to impose the will of the cult ultimately, and the state more closely to them on the population. That's what it's all about. And I just want to give you, well, I'm telling you, I live on the Isle of Wight. For people around the world, that's a little island just off the south coast of England. I don't know, was it 4 miles off the south coast of England, something like that. And we had the army arrive during this pandemic, right? And this is what they were doing. Army begin work at St Mary's Hospital. That's the only hospital on the Isle of Wight. And I'm highlighting this Isle of Wight example because it is a real microcosm of the macrocosm that's happening everywhere. The British Army have begun transforming 3 buildings into new wards at St Mary's Hospital in Newport to create an additional 200 beds. This is at a hospital where people who work there are telling me it's never been so quiet. It's basically half empty, mostly empty. A detachment of 40 men and women from the Scots Guards arrived on the island as part of a national plan mutual aid arrangements for military support for major incidents. The soldiers' role is to support the Isle of Wight National Health Service Trust Estates Department in implementing plans to reconfigure large parts of the hospital so more beds can be available. What, empty? More beds to be empty? It says that this lady, Maggie Oldham, she's chief executive of the Isle of Wight National Health Trust. Another person must be incredibly important. It's no secret that across the NHS, and certainly here on the island, people have been working very hard to respond to COVID-19 pandemic and under extraordinary pressure. You mean those people at St Mary's Hospital that have been making dancing videos in empty wards, them, and putting them on the internet? Our team at the hospital and our ambulance, community and mental health services have risen to the challenges in the last few weeks, and we are hugely grateful for their hard work. I am glad to welcome the Scots Guards to help us bring in 200 new beds to our hospital site. Having these brave men and women, what's brave about putting something in for more beds in a hospital. Anyway, the bullshit is unbelievable. Working alongside us will give us the extra support we need to get this huge amount of work done as quickly as possible. Right. Now contrast that with this. These are the latest figures. 15 deaths now linked with COVID-19 on the Isle of Wight. And as you know, Gaz, the Isle of Wight has a very, very large ratio, because so many people come here to retire, of old people. The Isle of Wight should be one of the hotspots. It eventually will be, if this goes on, not because of COVID-19, but the effect of the lockdowns and no treatment and diagnosis. But as far as COVID-19 goes, in the official figures, 15 deaths now linked with COVID-19 on the Isle of Wight. It's been confirmed this afternoon, this last Wednesday, that the death toll has increased from by one from 14 to 15. 2 deaths, listen to the language, you hear it everywhere. 2 deaths linked to COVID-19 have been recorded on the island in the past week. And look at what the opening line said again. 15 people have now died on the Isle of Wight after testing positive for COVID-19. Not that they died from it, though that goes on the figures. And then listen to this one to confirm what I'm saying. The latest victim of the virus but you just said they just tested positive. You didn't say they died from it. Now they're a victim of the virus. Died at St Mary's Hospital on 19th of April. Alistair Flowerdew, medical director of the Isle of Wight National Health Trust, said, sadly, we can confirm that 2 women being cared for at St Mary's Hospital who had tested positive for coronavirus, see the language, have died. Here we go. Aged in their 60s and 80s, the 2 women both had underlying health conditions. You see it everywhere. This scam of people dying of other diseases and conditions being diagnosed COVID-19. So we now have a total of 73 confirmed cases on the Isle of Wight as of April the 21st in a population of about 142,000. And they bring the bloody army in to provide extra beds at a hospital that's half bloody empty or less. Just one other thing on the Isle of Wight. Now, we discussed this last week, guys. Either this is just to scare people what's going on, or there's something else bloody planned down the road. Temporary mortuary containers are a precaution, say public health officials. We have one crematorium on the Isle of Wight, a place called Whippingham. This is the director of public health of the Isle of Wight has said that the installation of refrigerated containers at the crematorium is simply precautionary. When you see how few people are being affected on the Isle of Wight at this point by this virus, even if you believe it exists, and how few have died, even if you see how they scam the figures by diagnosing other conditions, COVID-19, what the hell are they doing? Putting what are basically, they're containers that you see on the back of a lorry and pulled off ships next to the crematorium to provide more mortuary facilities. Several large mobile refrigeration units have been shipped to the island. How much is all this costing if you add it all up all over the country? To act as a temporary storage for the deceased. A total of 4 containers has been placed to the rear of the Isle of Wight crematorium, although they have not yet been utilised. You do frickin' stagger me. If the containers are required, then islanders can be reassured that the deceased will be treated with the same dignity and respect that would normally be expected. Yeah, stick them in a refrigerated bloody container. Yeah, there's plenty of dignity. But this is happening with 73 cases so far, 15 deaths in a population of 142,000 of a very large ratio of old people. So, like I say, either this is just to ramp up the fear, which they're always trying to do, or they're planning something else at some point.
It's interesting actually, because we did a video cast a few weeks ago and it was deleted by YouTube, and we were talking, I think then another one, yeah, we were talking about the giant mortuary they were building in East London. It was like 2 acres, 2 football pitches.
Nightingale.
No,
it
was next to there. Yeah, the mortuary was next to there.
I'm going to come to Nightingale in a minute.
Yeah, and we had a conversation about it, and then we were talking then about the rollout of 5G and how 5G was being rolled out everywhere while everyone was in lockdown. And we then had a conversation where we basically said that it could well be interesting that you're choosing a pandemic time to roll out 5G, because you've almost covered yourself then. Because if you roll it out and people start dropping like flies, you have a ready-made excuse because you're in the middle of a pandemic, and we told you loads of people were going to die, right? So a week or so ago, I got a message from a mate going, "Here, mate, you're famous." And I was like, "What?" And I was featured on a mainstream thing in America with this guy. I can't remember his name now, but he's got like millions of followers, where he'd basically made a video about the craziest theories with coronavirus. And then a section of that was 5G, right? And so what I've said...
Intelligent bloke then.
Yeah, so what I've said is you know, it could be a good time to roll it out in terms of pandemic, because all of a sudden you introduce 5G, people drop like flies, and you've got a ready-made excuse because you're in the middle of a pandemic. That was just a theory. So what they did is they top and tailed it. So he's cutting to all these people talking on the internet, and then it cuts to me, and I go, "You introduce 5G, people drop like flies, cut." And they put that out there. And you're like, "Do you know what, mate? Like, you've taken all the context out of it, and it's so obvious." But what makes me laugh about that then is that what I'm saying has obviously got some validity. Otherwise, you wouldn't have topped and tailed it. You just left the whole thing in there. You've had to.
Yeah, well,
you know what I mean?
This is happening all the time. You don't delete videos when you are cult protectors because they're not telling the truth. You delete them because they are telling the truth. As simple as that. And that's one of the things that's happening is as they delete the videos, they're being given more and more credibility among people with a mind of their own. And so it becomes counterproductive for them. And we are finding more ways around it. You know, necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. So we must not give these people power that they don't deserve. You know, we can overcome this, but only if people start taking their minds back and stop just being acquiescent little clones of the system and believe anything that it tells them.
Exactly. And the thing with the 5G stuff is there's, like we spoke about it, I think it was last week, where it's being completely misrepresented, people's opinions. I heard something, we shared a video Alistair Williams did today where he was quoting Nick Ferrari, I think it is, on LBC. And what they were saying, yeah.
Nick Ferrari, the blob with the gob.
Yeah. And what they were saying, well, they brought Full Fact in, didn't they? Who's owned by a major Tory donor and funded by George Soros. So they must be, you know.
Yeah, Full Fact. Full Fact's another inversion.
Yeah, exactly. But what they were saying was that people are saying, and I'm guessing they include me and you in this, that 5G causes coronavirus. As far as I can see, no one's ever said that. No one's ever said that 5G technology causes a virus and spreads it around. What people are saying is that, one, could some of the symptoms that have been blamed on this COVID-19, particularly in New York, as we featured a doctor that was talking about that, could they actually, in fact, be symptoms of 5G rather than symptoms of a virus? So that's not saying it causes a virus. And the other thing, which is probably even bigger, is that these millimeter waves can affect the immune system so that people can become ill with other things. So again, they're completely misrepresenting it. Not accidentally either. They've not misunderstood what we've said. They've understood what we've said and gone, well, let's just make him sound like a prat.
Yeah, well, that's what they do. If you're telling the truth, they have to make you sound as if you're not. Otherwise, they'd have to debate you on what you're actually saying, and they don't want to do that. Have you noticed, by the way, that all this furore over my interview with London Real, etc., and all the other stuff that's going on, and it's been in the papers and Ofcom investigations and all this load of rubbish. Not one single media organization in the mainstream ever throughout all this has said, would you like to comment on what people are saying about you? Or would you like to come on and debate with someone who says something else about on our show? Not one of them. They have a go at you, but they don't want to give you a voice. They don't want to give you a voice because you'll have them for breakfast, dinner, and tea, basically on the facts and asking questions that they wouldn't dream of asking, and more than that, wouldn't even dare. When you've got the government broadcast regulator, Ofcom, banning British broadcasters from even having anyone on, never mind debating whether there's a connection in any way between 5G and this so-called virus, you know that there is a connection somewhere. Otherwise, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't bother. I was mentioning earlier, by the way, that Nightingale hospital for people around the world. And basically, it's an expansion of what I've just said about the Isle of Wight, which is a microcosm of the macrocosm. They took over this big conference area in London, and they've turned it into a massive intensive care unit with ventilators and stuff. Thousands of beds, I understand. And again, you look at it and you say, but the hospitals are basically empty. What are you doing? And there's a story this week why it's not being used. And what they can't say it's not being used because we're telling you a load of crap about a pandemic. So they've had to say this, because once you start lying, then as you lie, you get caught out on other lies. So what they're saying is it's not being used because of a shortage of nursing staff. Well, the nursing staff, I guess, are too busy making dancing videos in empty wards. That's why they can't get them for the Nightingale operation. It's a joke. People, if you're looking at this video by accident, and if you haven't got a mind of your own, you will be, please just look at the evidence staring you in the face and smacking you around the cheeks. Wake up.
It is it's more and more apparent every day as well. And I shared an article on davidicke.com today, actually, from Off Guardian, who've done a great job, to be fair.
They've done some great stuff, yeah. On the especially.
Yeah, because we've discussed before how basically a lot of the alternative media has completely been sucked in by this, which is hilarious to me, because a lot of these alternative media outlets have been warning us what was coming for a few years, decades even, and then now it's here and coronavirus is the cause that's created this. They're still buying this, and you're like, you've literally been warning this. This is madness to me. Anyway,
yeah, but they weren't listening to themselves, were they?
No, clearly not. But Off Guardian
they're still punching the bioweapon, the lethal bioweapon, and I keep saying to them, show me the dead people that you will get from them.
Yeah, and again, they're the same people that were saying, Project for the New American Century, rebuilding America's defenses, all these things. They want these wars, and it wants to end with a war and regime change in China. And you're like, yeah, and now you're pushing a bioweapon theory, which is literally going to legitimize going to war with China. Use your freaking brain. Anyway, Off Guardian. So the piece we shared today, which was very interesting, where they were talking about the death figures. And basically there was the biggest day in the UK, it was like 900 and something deaths in a day. And that was a couple of days before the lockdown was extended. So what that was doing was that was preparing the British people for the fact they were going to have a lockdown, because they need to accept it. It's like, shit, I don't want to have a lockdown because my business is being destroyed and my life's being destroyed. But Christ, 950 something in one day, that's even more than Spain's highest, Italy's highest, China's highest, whatever. So this article was shared today that actually on that day, 151 people died. and were counted as COVID-19. So that doesn't even mean they died of it. They were just labelled it. So 151. And actually the added figures on top of that were figures that were taken from dates between the 5th of March and the 5th of April. And they were just thrown in on top.
See, a proper journalist would investigate that. But what we have is a mainstream media, people by repeaters, unquestioning repeaters. And so they wouldn't question that. They just bang it out as fact without question or any research whatsoever. And you know, this is a psychological game. It's what I've been saying all these decades. The foundation of this global conspiracy is control of human psychology. So it's all psychology, and all of it, almost all of it, is based around the central theme of fear. And so this is what has happened. They have manipulated the figures. They put out figures and put out stories. I mean, what do you think the 77th Brigade is doing? It's putting out this stuff. That's what it's there for. It's a psychological warfare operation. And this pandemic is simply an expression of psychological warfare on the collective human psyche. That's what it is. And so if you, as you rightly point out, are going to introduce something extreme, then you whack out a figure that's going to frighten people. So they say, well, this is extreme, but we better accept it because, oh, this is so dangerous. And then once you've got the lockdown in place, this was the whole raison d'etre, yeah, I can speak Japanese, as you can see, of the projections by people like Neil Ferguson at Imperial College to put out this ridiculous, ludicrous, insane, go back, method in the madness, figure that between 250,000 people could die in Britain from this COVID-19. And that's what caused the lockdown. Oh, we must stop it. How do we stop that happening? We must have a lockdown, Mr. Prime Minister. And then once you have the lockdown, you've achieved your end. So you don't have to produce the figures then, because you've produced what the figures were there to create, which is a lockdown that's destroyed the livelihoods of vast numbers of people and made them dependent on the state, which is what this is really all about, plus the vaccine.
Exactly. And where is Boris Johnson anyway? Has he been carted off? And
where is Boris?
Hidden in a bunker somewhere?
You see, you ask this question, don't you? You've got Boris Johnson, who's officially the Prime Minister. And of all the people in all the country at all the times, he supposedly gets this COVID-19. It's very difficult to get something that doesn't exist. He got something. And now he's basically been taken out of circulation for a very significant chunk of time. And the dark suits have completely run they weren't running it before, but completely run it after he disappeared. If people think that's just another coincidence, well, they'll have to think that. But we are rather drowning in coincidences at the moment. Yeah,
I think Boris is, in terms of the establishment, is a bit of a liability, really, and I think that's probably why they wanted rid of him.
Yeah, he did show tendencies not to want to go into this lockdown before it happened. That's for sure, because he was pushing back on it very clearly. But then came the figures from Imperial College, and that caused the lockdown. They were the figures that did it. And of course, they did the same thing for the United States, where Ferguson predicted between 1 and 2 million dead in America. And by the way, there's an interesting thing I saw this morning about America and this so-called virus. Do you know nearly half the cases, deaths, particularly deaths from this COVID-19 as designated, nearly half are in two places in America. Parts of New York, and New Jersey, next to New York. And many states of America that have been locked down, and some of which have not, have tiny numbers, even with the designations. But of course, what you have with New York and New Jersey, that is basically the focus of where all the media are. And so everything is focused on New York and New Jersey to give the impression that this is what's happening in America. It's not what's happening in New York and New Jersey. So if this is a kind of a deadly, incredibly contagious virus, why is nearly half the number affected in two places next to each other on the East Coast, and very small numbers spread around the rest of the country? I wonder why the mainstream media have never asked that. Only one guy does, a guy called Tucker Carlson this morning on Fox News, the only TV journalist worth the title. He has been asking these questions that others will not ask. And that was one of them. Why is this? Yeah, why is it?
What was the answer he was given? Because I've not seen that yet.
There wasn't an answer.
Right.
It was basically left as a question. How can this be? How can states that haven't locked down have been virtually not affected by this? It's supposed to be a deadly contagious virus, isn't it?
Yeah. I wonder if Tucker Carlson actually knows the answer. Say that again, Dad, sorry.
I say it must be true. The World Health Organization said so.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking with Tucker Carlson, though, he's asked the question. I imagine he probably has an idea of what the answer is. He's just putting the question out there.
I think he does. There's a level of Carlson that broadcasts his questions and his points. I'm sure there's a level of Carlson that understands a lot more. I'm not saying he understands everything, but understands a lot more than he can broadcast. Because he wouldn't last too long if he went much further than he does. It's amazing that all he's doing is asking questions that any vaguely intelligent person would ask. But the rest of the mainstream media not only don't ask him, but berate and rail against those who do.
Yeah, you see a lot of that. It'll be interesting to see what happens this next week then, because every week something else is happening and something else is going on and more things are coming out that don't add up. So all I can hope for really, especially being stuck in the house, is that in the next few days more things come out, more people start to go, hang on, that's bollocks that. And then, and it goes on. Because it would be great to flush this nonsense down the toilet once and for all.
Yeah, and if we could just finish on this one point, which is a very central point, and that's Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a gopher for this cult. That's why he does what he does. That's why he's got the money that he does. And that's why vast chunks of the money that, by being a gopher for the cult, he has accrued, is given to philanthropy, which is really, as I've documented in the books over and over again, funding different aspects of the cult agenda. And his prime specialization is vaccines and this whole health thing. That's why he's the second biggest funder of the World Health Organization. And what's extraordinary, there's a video on davidicke.com, which is posted today as we make this recording, which looks through connections between Gates and the British, it's called the Vaccine Network. It advises the British government on vaccinations and made up of so-called experts from the industry, i.e. Big Pharma, and academics. And almost everyone has had massive funding from Bill Gates and his foundation. Then you look at the people around Johnson, like Whitty, the chief medical officer. All these people have been given massive grants by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Then you look at Fauci and Birx in America and others in that advisory circle around Trump, same, massive connections to Gates. And he's controlling the World Health Organization, which is basically dictating policy worldwide of this pandemic. Gates is running it. And Gates is the one that wants you to be vaccinated as a result of it. Red lights and waving red flags everywhere. People who have the vaccine, well, All the best.